The sun was setting over the quiet streets of Chicago, casting long shadows across the pavement. Detective Mark Reeves and his partner, Officer Ryan Holt, cruised through the neighborhood in their patrol car. Known for their tough demeanor and questionable methods, the two officers often took shortcuts when it came to enforcing the law. They prided themselves on keeping the streets safe, though their definition of safety seemed to target certain groups more than others. On this particular evening, the air felt calm, almost too calm. Reeves tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, bored out of his mind. Holt flicked through a stack of papers, glancing at minor infractions that barely warranted attention. That's when they spotted it, a sleek black car gliding smoothly down the road. The car wasn't speeding or swerving, but something about it caught their eye. Or maybe it wasn't the car at all. Maybe it was the driver. "Look at that," Reeves said, leaning forward slightly. "Nice ride. Wonder who's behind the wheel." Holt squinted. "Let's find out." They turned on their lights and signaled for the car to pull over. The driver, a woman with sharp features and an air of confidence, complied without hesitation. As they approached the vehicle, Reeves couldn't help but notice how composed she seemed. She rolled down her window and greeted them calmly, her voice steady and polite. "Good evening, officers. Is there a problem?" she asked. Reeves glanced at the dashboard, checking her license plate against their records. Everything seemed in order, but that didn't stop him from fishing for excuses. "Do you know why we pulled you over, ma'am?" The woman shook her head. "No, I don't. I wasn't speeding, and my lights are working fine." "Well, let's just say we're conducting a routine check," Holt chimed in, his tone laced with sarcasm. He leaned closer, peering into the car as if searching for something incriminating. "License and registration, please." Without missing a beat, the woman handed over her documents. Her name was Maya Thompson, and everything checked out. Valid license, up-to-date registration, no outstanding tickets. Still, Reeves and Holt weren't ready to let her go. They began peppering her with questions, probing for any slip-up they could exploit. "Where are you coming from tonight, Miss Thompson?" Reeves asked, dragging out her last name like it left a bad taste in his mouth. "I was visiting a friend," Maya replied coolly. "Is that a crime?" Reeves smirked. "Not yet. But you never know." Holt chimed in again, his tone mocking. "You sure you weren't racing anyone? This is quite the fancy car for these parts." Maya's patience was wearing thin, but she kept her composure. "I wasn't racing. I'm just trying to get home." But Reeves and Holt weren't interested in reason. They exchanged a glance, silently agreeing to push further. "Step out of the vehicle, Mom," Reeves demanded, his voice firm. "For what?" Maya asked, her eyebrows raised. "Suspicion of reckless driving," Holt lied, folding his arms. "We'll take it from here." Despite her protests, Maya stepped out of the car, her frustration simmering beneath the surface. As they handcuffed her and placed her in the back of the patrol car, Reeves muttered something under his breath, a comment meant to cut deep. Maya didn't respond. Instead, she stared straight ahead, her mind already plotting her next move. Little did the officers know, they had just made the biggest mistake of their careers. The inside of the jail cell was cold and damp, the kind of place that made you feel smaller than you already were. Maya sat on the hard metal bench, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow that did nothing to soften the grim reality of her situation. She replayed the events of the night in her mind, each memory fueling the fire of anger burning within her. "How dare they?" she thought, clenching her fists. "How dare they treat me like I'm nothing?" But Maya wasn't one to wallow for long. Even in the dim light of the cell, there was something about her, her posture, the set of her jaw, that radiated strength. She had spent years building a reputation as someone who didn't back down, someone who fought tooth and nail for what was right. And this was no different. If anything, it was personal now. She finally got her chance to make a phone call. Her fingers dialed the number from memory. and after 2 rings, Jamal Carter picked up. "Jamal," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "I need your help." Jamal listened intently as Maya explained what had happened. His tone shifted from concern to outrage as he pieced together the details. "They did what?" he exclaimed. "Maya, this is insane. Don't worry. I'll get you out of there." True to his word, Jamal sprang into action. He called a bail bondsman, filed an emergency motion with the court, and even reached out to a few journalist friends who might be interested in the story. By sunrise, Maya was released, stepping back into the cool morning air with a renewed sense of purpose. But freedom wasn't enough. She wanted justice. Meanwhile, Reeves and Holt were oblivious to the chaos they'd unleashed. Back at the precinct, they high-fived each other, congratulating themselves on another win. To them, Maya was just another faceless statistic, a person they could intimidate and dismiss without consequence. They laughed about how smoothly everything had gone, how easily they'd gotten away with it. "You see that car?" Holt said, leaning back in his chair. "Bet she won't be driving it so fast next time. Or maybe she'll think twice before rolling through our streets," Reeves added with a smirk. What they didn't know, and what would soon become painfully clear, was that Maya wasn't just any ordinary citizen. In fact, just days before her arrest, she had received a letter informing her of a temporary appointment as a judge. It was a prestigious role, reserved for only the most qualified individuals, and Maya had earned it through years of hard work and dedication. But the news hadn't been officially announced yet, leaving Reeves and Holt blissfully unaware of the reckoning headed their way. As Maya walked away from the jail, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds, she felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, yes, but also determination. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Taking on the system meant facing powerful opponents who wouldn't go down without a fight. But Maya wasn't afraid of a challenge. If anything, she thrived on them. By the time she reached her apartment, her resolve was solidified. She opened her laptop and began drafting emails, making calls, and laying the groundwork for what was sure to be a battle for the ages. Little did Reeves and Holt know, their actions had set off a chain reaction, one that would lead them straight into her courtroom. And when that day came, Maya promised herself, they wouldn't know what hit. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Maya's apartment as she stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the black judicial robe draped over her shoulders. It was a garment that carried weight, both literal and symbolic, and she felt its significance with every movement. This wasn't just another day. It was the first time she'd step into a courtroom not as an attorney, but as the person presiding over justice itself. The thought sent a thrill through her, mingled with nerves. She had worked hard for this moment, and now, more than ever, she was determined to make it count. As she drove to the courthouse, her mind drifted back to the night of her arrest. The memory still stung, but instead of letting it consume her, she channeled it into focus. Today wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness, about showing the world what true justice looked like. Still, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction, knowing that fate had placed her exactly where she needed to be. When Maya arrived at the courthouse, she took a deep breath before stepping inside. The building buzzed with activity, lawyers rushing down hallways, clerks shuffling papers, and defendants waiting nervously on benches. She made her way to her assigned courtroom, her heels clicking against the polished floor. As she pushed open the heavy wooden doors, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, some curious, others respectful. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to soak it in, the gravity of the moment, the responsibility resting on her shoulders. Her clerk handed her the docket for the day, a list of cases scheduled to be heard. As she scanned the names, one entry caught her attention. State v. Officers Mark Reeves and Ryan Holt. Her heart skipped a beat. They weren't the defendants in this case. They were witnesses testifying in a separate matter involving allegations of excessive force. But their presence in her courtroom felt like something out of a movie script, too perfect to be coincidence. Maya sat behind the bench, her expression calm and composed. She reviewed the details of the case they were involved in. A young man named Marcus Lane had filed a complaint against several officers, including Reeves and Holt, claiming he'd been mistreated during an arrest. The allegations weren't new, similar complaints had surfaced before. But this time, there was video evidence backing up Marcus's claims. Maya knew the stakes were high. This case could either expose the cracks in the system or let them fester unnoticed. As the clock ticked closer to the start of proceedings, Maya reminded herself of her role. She wasn't there to settle personal scores. She was there to ensure fairness, to listen without bias, and to uphold the law. But she also knew that sometimes justice required courage. And if Reeves and Holt thought they could walk into her courtroom and act with the same arrogance they'd shown her, they were in for a rude awakening. When the bailiff called the court to order, Maya rose from her seat, her voice steady and commanding. "All rise," he announced, and the room obeyed. As everyone settled back into their seats, Maya took a moment to survey the gallery. That's when she saw them, Reeves and Holt, seated near the front, looking bored and disinterested. They hadn't noticed her yet, and Maya didn't say a word. Instead, she simply watched them, her lips curling into the faintest hint of a smile. This was going to be interesting. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as the proceedings began. Maya sat tall behind the bench, her presence commanding yet calm. She had already called the case to order and listened intently as the plaintiff's attorney outlined Marcus Lane's allegations against the officers. The video evidence was played. A grainy but damning recording showing Reeves and Holt using excessive force during an arrest. It wasn't pretty, and even some of their fellow officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. When it came time for the defense to present its side, Reeves and Holt were called to testify. They stood up confidently, smoothing their uniforms as if preparing for another routine hearing. Neither of them glanced at the judge as they approached the witness stand. That changed the moment Maya spoke. "Officers," she said, her voice steady and professional, "please state your names for the record." Reeves froze mid-step, his eyes snapping toward the bench. For a split second, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Holt followed his gaze, and soon both men were staring at Maya, their faces pale and slack-jawed. The realization hit them like a freight train. The woman they had mocked, humiliated, and arrested just days ago was now the person deciding their fate. Your Honor," Reeves stammered, struggling to find words. I didn't realize." Maya raised a hand, cutting him off. Her expression remained neutral, unreadable. "Let's stay focused on the matter at hand. Officer Reeves, please proceed." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Reeves fumbled through his testimony, stumbling over simple questions. Holt didn't fare much better. Both men seemed rattled, their usual bravado replaced by unease. Every time Maya asked a question, their eyes darted around the room, searching for some kind of escape that didn't exist. As the cross-examination continued, Maya's demeanor never wavered. She asked pointed, precise questions, each one designed to expose inconsistencies in their stories. When Reeves tried to downplay the severity of the incident captured on video, Maya leaned forward slightly, her tone sharpening. "Officer Reeves," she said, her voice carrying just enough weight to make him flinch, "you claim that Mr. Lane resisted arrest. Yet the footage clearly shows him complying with your commands. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Reeves hesitated, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "Well, I mean sometimes things happen quickly, and yet," Maya interrupted smoothly, "the camera doesn't lie, does it? Or are we to assume that technology is also guilty of resisting arrest?" A ripple of laughter spread through the gallery, quickly silenced by the bailiff's stern glare. Reeves flushed red, sinking deeper into his chair. Holt wasn't faring any better. When it was his turn to testify, Maya zeroed in on his earlier comments about certain neighborhoods being prone to crime. "You stated in your report that Mr. Lane's behavior was suspicious," she said, glancing at the document in front of her. Can you elaborate on what made it so suspicious? Holt blinked rapidly, caught off guard. Well, he was acting nervous. Nervous, Maya repeated slowly, letting the word hang in the air. Would you say walking home late at night qualifies as inherently suspicious behavior? No, Your Honor, Holt muttered, avoiding eye contact. Then perhaps, Maya continued, her tone sharp but controlled, your assessment was influenced less by facts and more by assumptions. Would you agree? Holt opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, defeated. The gallery stirred quietly, whispers spreading like wildfire. People exchanged glances, some nodding in approval while others shook their heads in disbelief at the officer's incompetence. Throughout it all, Maya maintained her composure, her professionalism unwavering. But inside, she felt a spark of triumph, not because she wanted to embarrass them, but because she knew she was doing her job. Justice wasn't blind, it was vigilant. And today, vigilance meant holding these men accountable for their actions. By the time the two officers stepped down from the stand, they looked smaller somehow, less imposing, less confident. Their colleagues avoided meeting their eyes, and even the defense attorney seemed eager to move on. As Maya adjourned the session for a short recess, she allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. This wasn't over yet, but one thing was clear. Reeves and Holt were no longer in control. Copy. Ask. Explain. When the court reconvened after the recess, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The gallery was fuller now, whispers buzzing like a distant swarm of bees. Word had spread quickly about who was presiding over the case, and curious onlookers, some supportive, others skeptical, had gathered to witness the drama unfold. Maya sat behind the bench, her expression calm but focused, as if she were piecing together a puzzle only she could see. The defense attorney tried to regain control of the narrative, attempting to poke holes in Marcus Lane's account and discredit the video evidence. But Maya wasn't having it. She listened intently, her sharp eyes catching every detail, every evasion. When the defense argued that the officer's actions were justified due to heightened tensions in the area, Maya leaned forward slightly, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Counselor," she said, her tone measured but firm, "are you suggesting that certain neighborhoods deserve less protection under the law simply because of their location or demographics?" The defense attorney faltered, his face reddening. "No, Your Honor, not at all." "Then perhaps we should focus on the facts." Maya interjected smoothly. "Facts such as the clear instructions Mr. Lane followed, the lack of resistance shown in the footage, and the disproportionate response from your clients." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The defense squirmed, unable to counter her logic. Reeves and Holt sat stiffly in their seats, avoiding eye contact with anyone, especially her. Their earlier arrogance had evaporated completely, replaced by a palpable sense of dread. Maya turned her attention back to the heart of the matter. Systemic issues within law enforcement. Without raising her voice or losing her composure, she began dismantling the culture of excuses that often shielded officers like Reeves and Holt. She highlighted patterns, repeated complaints against them, similar cases dismissed without consequence, and the broader impact on public trust. "Law enforcement exists to serve and protect," she said, addressing both the officers and the courtroom. "But when those entrusted with power abuse it, they erode the very foundation of justice. We cannot ignore this reality any longer." Her words resonated deeply, earning nods of agreement from the gallery. Even some of the other officers present seemed uncomfortable, shifting in their seats as if suddenly aware of how closely they were being watched. As the hearing drew to a close, Maya instructed the panel overseeing the case to deliberate carefully. She reminded them of their duty to uphold integrity and fairness, not just for Marcus Lane, but for everyone affected by the actions of these officers. Then, with a final glance at Reeves and Holt, she adjourned the session. Outside the courtroom, the story exploded. Journalists stationed in the hallway scrambled to capture reactions from attendees. Marcus Lane spoke briefly, his voice trembling with gratitude. "I never thought anyone would listen," he admitted. "But Judge Thompson, she made me feel like my voice mattered." Meanwhile, Reeves and Holt retreated to a corner, their heads bowed low. They knew what was coming next, a recommendation for disciplinary action, possibly even criminal charges stemming from their behavior during Marcus's arrest. And then there was Maya's own case against them for false arrest. The walls were closing in fast. Back in her chambers, Maya allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She stared out the window, watching the city stretch endlessly before her. This victory wasn't hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever been silenced, dismissed, or mistreated. But she also knew the fight wasn't over. There would be more battles ahead, more systems to challenge, more voices to amplify. For now, though, she let herself smile, a small private gesture of triumph. Justice might not always be swift, but today, it felt just a little bit closer. The recommendation for disciplinary action against Reeves and Holt came swiftly. After hours of deliberation, the panel concluded that their conduct during Marcus Lane's arrest was unjustifiable. They were suspended without pay, ordered to undergo mandatory sensitivity training, and placed on probation within the department. But Maya knew this wasn't enough. While the ruling sent a message, it didn't address the deeper harm caused by their actions, or the countless others like them who operated under a cloak of impunity. That evening, Maya sat at her desk in her chambers, surrounded by stacks of files and legal documents. Her mind raced as she drafted additional charges against the two officers, not just for their role in Marcus's case, but also for her own unlawful arrest. She included every detail: the derogatory remarks, the baseless accusations, the blatant misuse of authority. It was personal now, yes, but it was also about setting an example. If officers like Reeves and Holt could be held accountable, maybe others would think twice before abusing their power. Word of Maya's lawsuit spread quickly, igniting a firestorm of public outrage. Local news outlets covered the story extensively, airing interviews with community members who had long felt powerless against law enforcement abuses. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs that read "Justice over bias" and "Accountability starts here." Among them were faces Maya recognized, people she'd represented in court, people who had once doubted the system could ever work for them. Seeing their determination filled her with a renewed sense of purpose. But not everyone supported her. Some police unions pushed back fiercely, accusing Maya of bias and overreach. They argued that singling out individual officers undermined morale and painted the entire force with the same brush. Online forums lit up with heated debates, some defending Maya while others attacked her character. Through it all, Maya remained unfazed. She expected resistance. It came with the territory. But she refused to let fear dictate her decisions. Reeves and Holt, meanwhile, were unraveling. Stripped of their badges temporarily and facing mounting legal fees, they became pariahs within the department. Former colleagues distanced themselves, embarrassed by association. Their families struggled too. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, and friends stopped calling. The weight of their choices pressed down on them, suffocating and unrelenting. One afternoon, Maya received a letter from Marcus Lane. In it, he thanked her not only for believing him, but for giving him hope. "You showed me that justice isn't just something we dream about," he wrote. "It's something we can fight for and win." His words stayed with her, fueling her resolve even when exhaustion threatened to take over. As weeks turned into months, the case gained national attention. Talk shows invited experts to discuss systemic racism in policing, while social media campaigns amplified calls for reform. Maya found herself at the center of it all, a symbol of resilience and courage. Yet she never lost sight of why she started this journey. This wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about creating a world where no one had to endure what Marcus or she herself had gone through. In private moments, Maya allowed herself to reflect on how far she'd come. From sitting in that cold jail cell to standing behind the bench, she had faced adversity head-on and emerged stronger. Still, She knew true change wouldn't happen overnight. Lawsuits and suspensions were steps in the right direction, but lasting progress required dismantling deeply ingrained biases and rebuilding trust piece by piece. And so, Maya pressed forward, filing motions, speaking at rallies, and mentoring young lawyers eager to make a difference. Each victory, no matter how small, reminded her that justice was worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. As she stood on the courthouse steps one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she felt a quiet pride. The road ahead would be long, but for the first time in a while, she believed real change was possible. Months had passed since the trial, and life for Maya Thompson had transformed in ways she hadn't anticipated. The case against Reeves and Holt concluded with a landmark settlement: financial compensation for their victims, permanent demotions within the department, and an official acknowledgement of wrongdoing. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was progress. For Maya, though, the real victory lay in the ripple effect her actions had created. Conversations about accountability in law enforcement were no longer whispers. They were shouts heard across the country. The media attention brought both praise and criticism. Some hailed her as a hero, a beacon of hope for marginalized communities who had long suffered silently. Others accused her of being too harsh, claiming she was out to dismantle the system entirely. Maya didn't let the noise distract her. She knew that meaningful change often came with resistance, and she was prepared to face it head-on. One evening, after a long day at the courthouse, Maya sat alone on her balcony, sipping tea and staring at the city skyline. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications, messages from supporters, emails from journalists, and updates from colleagues working on similar cases. Despite the chaos around her, she felt a rare moment of calm. This fight wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed in fairness, equality, and justice. Her thoughts drifted back to Reeves and Holt. Their lives had unraveled completely. Once confident and brash, they now struggled to find work outside the department. Applications went unanswered. Interviews ended abruptly when their names came up. Even friends and family distanced themselves, tired of being associated with scandal. Maya didn't feel pity for them. They had made their choices, but she couldn't ignore the lesson their downfall represented. Power unchecked could destroy not only others, but also oneself. At the same time, Maya reflected on her own journey. She thought about the night she'd been arrested, sitting in that cold jail cell, wondering if anyone would listen. Now here she was, a judge, an advocate, and a symbol of resilience. But she knew better than to rest on her laurels. True justice wasn't about one person or one case. It was about creating systems that worked for everyone. And that meant more than punishing bad actors. It meant preventing harm before it happened. Determined to keep pushing forward, Maya began dedicating more time to mentoring young lawyers and activists. She hosted workshops at local schools, sharing stories of her struggles and triumphs. Justice isn't just blind, she told students during one session. It must also be brave. It takes courage to stand up when the odds are against you. But remember, you're never standing alone. Her efforts inspired a new wave of advocates. Young people filled courtrooms, rallied for policy changes, and used social media to amplify voices that had long been ignored. One teenager even approached Maya after a speech, tears streaming down his face. "I want to be like you," he said. "I want to help people like you helped me." Maya smiled softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to be like me," she replied. "Be better. Be bolder. That's how we move forward." As weeks turned into months, Maya noticed subtle shifts in the community. Police departments implemented stricter oversight measures, lawmakers introduced bills aimed at reform, and citizens demanded transparency. None of these changes happened overnight, but each step brought them closer to a fairer world. Still, Maya understood that systemic issues wouldn't disappear entirely. There would always be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But she chose to focus on the victories, no matter how small. Every officer held accountable, every student inspired to pursue justice, Every voice lifted from silence. It all mattered. Late one night, as she reviewed case files spread across her dining table, Maya paused to look at a framed photo nearby. It was a picture of her parents, taken years ago when she was just a child. They had taught her the value of perseverance, of standing firm even when the world tried to knock her down. In that moment, she felt their presence, guiding her still. "Change starts with us," she whispered to herself, echoing words she often shared with others. "And it continues because of us." With renewed determination, Maya returned to her work, knowing that while the road ahead was long, every step counted. Justice wasn't just something handed down from above. It was something built together, brick by brick, heart by heart. Months turned into years, and Maya Thompson's name became synonymous with courage and reform. Her temporary appointment as a judge had evolved into something permanent, a testament to her unwavering dedication to justice. She was no longer just the woman who took down Reeves and Holt. Instead, she stood as a pillar of hope for countless individuals seeking fairness in a flawed system. The courtroom where it all began now bore a plaque commemorating its role in sparking change. It read, "Justice is not blind. It sees clearly when we choose to act boldly." Students on field trips would often stop there, their teachers explaining how one person's determination could ignite a movement. For Maya, the plaque wasn't just an honor. It was a reminder of why she kept fighting. Her influence extended far beyond the courthouse walls. Maya traveled across the country, delivering speeches at universities, community centers, and conferences. She spoke about systemic racism, accountability, and the importance of representation within the legal system. Her words resonated deeply, particularly with young people eager to make a difference. At one high school assembly, a student raised her hand timidly and asked, "What if I'm scared to speak up?" Maya leaned closer, her voice warm but firm. "Being scared doesn't mean you're weak," she said. "It means you care enough to try. And when you do, you'll find others standing beside you." Inspired by her journey, many students pursued careers in law, activism, or public service. Some even reached out to thank her personally, sharing how her story motivated them to push past their fears. One letter came from a young man named Jamal, named after her close friend, who wrote, "You showed me that justice isn't just for the powerful. It's for everyone." Reeves and Holt faded into obscurity, their names occasionally mentioned as cautionary tales in training sessions for new officers. Their downfall served as a stark reminder of the consequences of prejudice and abuse of power. Meanwhile, departments nationwide adopted stricter policies to prevent similar incidents. Body cameras became mandatory, independent review boards gained more authority, and transparency initiatives fostered trust between law enforcement and communities. But Maya knew true progress required constant vigilance. Lawsuits and reforms were steps forward, but dismantling generations of inequality demanded sustained effort. So she continued mentoring young lawyers, hosting workshops, and advocating for policy changes. Every success, no matter how small, fueled her resolve. One evening, Maya returned to the neighborhood where it all began, the same streets where Reeves and Holt had pulled her over years ago. The area felt different now, alive with murals celebrating resilience and unity. A group of children played basketball under flickering streetlights, laughing without a care in the world. Maya smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride. As she walked back to her car, a teenager approached her. "Are you Judge Thompson?" he asked hesitantly. "Yes," she replied, tilting her head curiously. "I heard your story," he said, his voice trembling slightly. I want to be like you someday. To help people, you know." Maya placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes softening. "You already are helping people," she told him. "By wanting to make a difference, you've taken the first step. Keep going." That night, as she drove home, Maya reflected on how far she'd come, and how much farther society still needed to go. Change wasn't linear. It was messy, unpredictable, and often slow. But every moment of courage, every voice lifted, and every heart inspired brought them closer to a fairer world. Back at her apartment, Maya stood by the window, gazing at the city lights. Her journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Justice wasn't perfect, and neither was she. But together, with persistence, compassion, and collective action, they were building something stronger, braver, and better. And as long as there were people willing to fight for what was right, Maya knew the future held endless possibilities.